Hello, good morning. Here we are again. Talk about Hayden Edwards, and this probably the fifth or sixth taping that we've done. When we talked last time, we were talking about impresarios like Stephen F. Austin and others who came peacefully to Texas, and we said that as long as they had peaceful intent, Anglo-Americans who settled in Texas were not harassed. But one particular impresario who was not good for Mexico was the impresario Hayden Edwards, who in 1825 received permission to settle East Texas. And among his claim were the descendants of the 1779 settlers who went back to Nacogdoches, who had initially been relocated to San Antonio. There were 30 families on the San Antonio River, part of Stephen F. Austin's grant, and numerous squatters and remnants of Indian tribes. And immediately Hayden Edwards demanded that every Anglo-American had to show title to their land or else they owed him money. And Stephen F. Austin advised Edwards not to antagonize the Mexican authorities, but he kept pushing, and pretty soon individuals appealed to Guadalupe Victoria, who in June of 1826 issued a order expelling Hayden Edwards. But the order didn't reach East Texas until October of 1826, and even before the order arrived, the plotting had begun. In December of 1826, Benjamin Edwards, Hayden's brother, with 15 to 30 men, rode into Nacogdoches and proclaimed the Independent Republic of Fredonia, the Independent Republic of Fredonia. Few Anglo-American settlers supported Hayden Edwards, and he had failed to make a pact with the Cherokee Indians of East Texas, and so eventually he was standing alone against the power of the Mexican national state. And in truth, 400 soldiers were sent against Hayden Edwards and his brother Benjamin in Nacogdoches. 300 Mexican troops from Austin under Saucedo, the political governor, and 100 Anglo-American settlers from Stephen F. Austin's claim. So 400 armed men, 100 of which were Anglos, move against Hayden Edwards and the Republic of Fredonia. Long before the troops arrived in Nacogdoches, Hayden Edwards and his brothers and their followers had fled back across the Sabine into the United States, and so not one shot was fired between opposing forces. The truth is that Mexican officials should have recognized that when 100 Anglo-Americans took up arms in defense of Mexico, that the Anglo-Americans were fairly loyal in Texas. But unfortunately, the American press and public followed the events of the Republic of Fredonia through New Orleans newspapers. And just about this time, the Mexican minister to Washington, Senator Obregon, suggested that maybe Mexico ought to close the American frontier to further immigration. It didn't help that the American minister to Mexico, Joel Poinsett, took the opportunity in the face of Mexican anxiety over Hayden Edwards and what had happened to ask for a clarification of the 1819 Adams-Onis Treaty between the United States and Spain. In 1819, in the Adams-Onis Treaty, the United States was given Spanish Florida, but in return had to disavow any interest in Spanish Texas. But now Poinsett asked for a clarification because that was between the United States and Spain, and now Mexico is an independent nation. So just at the time that Mexican officials are feeling anxious about holding on to Texas, the American minister, Joel Poinsett, asked if Mexico really is truly independent of the United States relative to the Louisiana Purchase. And in January of 1828, an agreement was signed between the United States and Mexico that acknowledged that Texas was a sovereign Mexican state and not part of the Louisiana Purchase. But just asking, Joel Poinsett upset the Mexican government. While this treaty between the United States and Mexico was pending, General Manuel Mir y Terán was sent to Texas to survey the boundary of between Louisiana and in Mexican Texas. His 1828 report recommended made several recommendations to avoid what he referred to as the Anglicanization of Texas. One, that Mexico should colonize only from the interior of Mexico and send Mexican citizens into Texas. The only exception would be foreign immigration coming from not the United States, but from Switzerland and Germany. The Swiss and the Germans were acceptable as far as the Mexican nation was concerned. The Mexican government should encourage coastal trade with Texas and the rest of Mexico proper, as opposed to Texans trading with the United States. And Mexico would put more Mexican troops into Texas, including convict soldiers who had to serve out as convicts their term in the Mexican army, and then when their term was over, they would be given land and settled within Texas. Mir y Terán's report would not be implemented for 2 years, 1830, due to internal Mexican politics, because in 1828, the Mexican presidential election year, Gómez Pedraza, a Spanish-born in Spain, a Peninsulario, an educated gentleman, was opposed by Vicente Guerrero, the mestizo popular hero of the Mexican Revolution. In the presidential elections in Mexico, people didn't go to the polls and vote. Individual state legislatures voted, with a majority winning, a majority of a candidate receiving a majority of state legislatures, then could proclaim himself to be president. In the 1828 election, 10 state legislatures voted to support Pedraza, 8 supported Guerrero, 1 state refused to vote. So technically, Pedraza won the election. But General Antonio Lopez de Saniana, commander at Jalapa, marched on Mexico City, seized Perote Castle in Mexico City, and declared the 1828 election results were null and void, and that Vicente Guerrero should be president of Mexico. Guerrero portrayed as a hero of the Mexican people, and Pedraza was portrayed by Saniana as a friend of former Emperor Iturbide and a possible president who would restore the Spanish monarchy in Mexico. Guerrero therefore took power with Saniana's backing on April the 1st of 1829. Now, Vicente Guerrero did something almost immediately by the end of the year that alienated many Texans. He outlawed slavery in Mexico. But by December the 2nd of 1829, so many Anglo-Americans had protested that Vicente Guerrero exempted Texans from the end to the institution of slavery. Remember that according to the Mexican Constitution, that slavery was allowable, but all slaves who were born in Mexico at age 16 would be freed of the institution of slavery. Guerrero decided that he was going to end the institution of slavery, but he backed off after the Texans objected. 2 days after exempting Texas, a centralist revolution broke out against Guerrero, led by the army, the church, the hacendados, the landed classes. The conservatives of Mexico reacted and sought to elevate Vice President Anastasio Bustamante to the presidency of Mexico. General Saniana initially urged President Guerrero to resist Bustamante, while few others did. When Guerrero finally left Mexico City and marched against Bustamante's forces and promptly got himself surrounded, Santillana then issued a statement declaring that since Guerrero had, quote, voluntarily abandoned Mexico City, that he could see nothing but to recognize Bustamante's presidency in January of 1830. Santillana immediately retired to his jalapa, claiming poor health, and on February the 14th, Valentine's Day, 1831, Bustamante had Guerrero shot. The new president, Bustamante, appointed Mir y Terán as the military commander of Texas and as the Foreign Relations Secretary of Mexico, the most rabid anti-American he could find, Lucius Ignacio Alemán. Indeed, the anti-Anglo immigration cabal had assumed power. And it didn't help in 1828 that Andrew Jackson had been elected in the United States. And while a Spanish army was attempting to reconquer Mexico, and Santillana, this is when Santillana saves Mexico from the Spanish army. While the Spanish were still on Mexican soil, Jackson instructed Secretary of State Martin Van Buren, to inquire whether or not Mexico would be interested in selling Texas to the United States. Newspaper articles in the United States supported the acquisition of Texas, reaffirming Mexican government's fears over the Americanization of its most northern province. When the Mexican government asked for the recall of Joel Poinsett, Andrew Jackson selected Anthony Butler to succeed him. And Butler was again instructed to buy Texas for the United States of America. In order to avoid losing Texas, the Bustamante government decided to protect it by passing April the 6th, 1830, a Mexican anti-immigration law which stopped all immigration into Texas, particularly by, quote, citizens of foreign countries lying contiguous to the Mexican territory. And unless you're talking about Venezuela in the far south of Mexico, the United States was the nation that was lying adjacent to the Mexican territory. Stephen F. Austin and Green DeWitt liberally interpreted the anti-immigration law of April 6, 1830 to complete their quota of families under their current contract, but by November of 1831, immigration had effectively ended. Eventually, the law would be revoked in May of 1834 after considerable lobbying. But what were the political implications when the Mexican Congress passed this April 6, 1831 bill that stopped immigration? Remember that under the Mexican National Constitution, Coahuila and Bexar were created as one state because the citizens of Bexar, i.e. Texas, there weren't enough citizens to justify independent statehood under the Mexican national state. And Mexico's national government basically said, cool your heels, and when enough Anglo-Americans are settled in Texas, you can split away from Coahuila and you can have your own independent Mexican national state. But now, with this April 6, 1831 law stopping immigration from the United States, that meant that never would Texas ever have enough people in it to create a Mexican national state for Texas. Indeed, adding to the problem is that about this time, Texans started having to pay taxes and duties to Mexico. And in Anahuac, by the summer of 1832, Juan Bradburn, and a Mexican soldier, colonel, collecting taxes in Anahuac, arrested William Barrett Travis. Travis attempted a ruse by claiming the armed rebellion of Louisianans were invading Texas in order to secure the release of 2 runaway slaves that Bradburn had in his protective custody. Travis was promptly arrested, and when Bradburn refused to release him, many branded Bradburn as a despot. And in fact, in June of 1832, 160 Anglo-Americans from Anahuac and Brazoria marched toward Bradburn's garrison. While waiting for reinforcements, the Anglos, 160 strong, issued a statement called the Turtle Bayou Resolutions in June of 1832, arguing that their actions were in defense of the Mexican national constitution, that they were essentially defending their civil rights, just as in the same way that Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna was now defending Mexican civil rights as he moved against the Bustamante government in the interior of Mexico. At the last moment, a Colonel Jose de las Piedras, Mexican commander at Nacogdoches, intervened and promised the Anglo-Americans, rather than attack Bradburn at Anahuac, that he would, one, replace Bradburn, two, he would release those who, including Travis, who were held by Bradburn for civil trial, and that the citizens of Bexar could petition the Mexican Congress for redress of their grievances. Indeed, in other words, cooler heads prevailed. But the whole of Mexico was in rebellion between Bustamante and Santa Anna, and indeed in July the 3rd of 1832, Miri Turan, the architect of the anti-American perspectives on Texas, actually committed suicide. It was at this point in 1832, ayuntamiento, city councils of Texas cities, ayuntamiento after ayuntamiento pledged for Santa Anna and his support of federalism, and they determined to drive every Mexican centralist soldier, Bustamante forces, from Texas soil. And indeed, East Texas was, the Mexican army was pushed out of East Texas, and in August of 1830, Ramon Musquez, the political chief of San Antonio, belatedly declared for Santa Anna. And so federalism was on the rise throughout Mexico, including in Texas. Rumors persisted, however, in Mexico that what the Texans really wanted was to have in their own independence. And near Matamoros, a contingent of Mexican troops under General Jose Antonio Mejia, loyal to Santa Anna, was opposed by Colonel Jose Guerra, who was a supporter of Bustamante. A truce was made, and both colonels of both factions agreeing that they needed to save Texas from leaving Mexico. Mejia and 400 troops sailed to Texas, and fortunately on the boat that accompanied the Mexican troops northward to Texas, Stephen F. Austin had left Mexico City, and he assured Mejia and the Mexican troops that the vast majority of Texans supported Santa Anna and federalism. Mejia was wined and dined in mid-1832 and soon returned to Veracruz, Mexico, to join Santa Anna and play a significant part in the fighting between Bustamante and Santa Anna. The San Felipe de Austin Ayuntamiento called for a general consultation of all Anglos to determine the future of Texas, and set San Felipe de Austin as the place and October the 1st, 1832 as the date of the convention. On that day, October the 1st, 1832, 56 delegates gathered in San Felipe and promptly elected Stephen F. Austin as the consultation's president. Numerous memorials were adopted, and perhaps the most significant was a memorial calling for Texas statehood, independent and separate from Coahuila, but still within the Mexican national state. This memorial passed 36 to 12 with 8 abstentions, revealing the true intent of those who had gathered as delegates. Adjourning in October the 6th, none of the petitions got past San Antonio officials, who believed that the first consultation was a violation of Mexican law, and Santa Anna certainly saw that as a violation of Mexican law and authority. The first convention or consultation set up a committee on safety and correspondence. And that committee called for a second consultation to be held at San Felipe on April the 1st, 1833. Criticism of the first consultation was that it was held too quickly after the call and before adequate numbers of delegates could be chosen, that the call did not include the issue of separate Mexican statehood, and some, those who favored Mexican independent statehood, complained that there was no proposed constitution that had been drafted. Yet before the second convention could meet in April of 1833, turmoil came to an end in Mexico. Santa Anna and Bustamante signed an agreement in December of 1832 that would allow Gomez Pedraza to come back and to serve out the unexpired Bustamante term as president from December 1832 until April the 1st of 1833. There was no doubt on April the 1st of 1833 that Santa Anna would be elected president of Mexico. And in fact, on that day, April the 1st, 1833, Santa Anna was elected president and Gomez Farias as vice president of Mexico. Santa Anna suspected the intentions of Texans from day one, even before he took power, as did Ramon Musquez, the political chief of San Antonio. And the truth is that Santa Anna had already decided to relocate Mexican troops to Texas under General Vicente Filasola, commander at Matamoros. More delegates attended the second consultation in April 1833 than the first in October of 1832, and only one-third attended both conventions. The second consultation included a much more discontented set of delegates, including Sam Houston, who had just entered the United States from the United States in December of 1832 after the Stanberry affair in Washington, D.C. Senator Sam Houston, United States Senator from Tennessee, had beaten a representative by the name of Stanberry who had criticized Andrew Jackson, President of the United States, who was Sam Houston's mentor. And the United States Senate censured Sam Houston, fined him $500 for assault and battery. And Sam Houston basically said, you know what, you can have this Senate seat, and I'll just go the hell to Texas and make my fortune. So he entered Texas in December of 1832, and he would serve in this April 1, 1833 consultation. At the consultation, the delegates turned away from Austin and elected William Wharton, the man that he had defeated in the first consultation. And they did the same thing during the first consultation, second consultation as the first. The majority of the delegates voted for an independent Texas within the Mexican national state. And this time, they even wrote up a proposed Mexican national state constitution for Texas, and it was written by basically Sam Houston. The three delegates were chosen to take this proposed constitution to Mexico City, but only Stephen F. Austin would make the journey. At Matamoros, Austin met with Filasola and told him that Texas did not want independence or annexation to the United States. Austin arrived in Mexico City in July of 1833 to discover the true complexity of Mexican politics. Santa Anna had become president in April, but he had left the presidency claiming ill health, and he left it to his vice president, Gomez Farias, to go to Congress and try to get an endorsement for the 1824 Federalist Mexican National Constitution. And of course, the conservatives in Congress turned him down. And Santa Anna had just come back into the presidency, but just a few days before Austin arrived, had stepped down in order to lead 2,400 Mexican troops loyal to federalism against a centralist uprising in Puebla. And so when Austin arrived with his proposed 1833 Constitution, the forces against federalism were in control. Farias welcomed Austin, and even submitted the proposed 1833 Constitution to the Mexican Congress. But the summer of 1833, Mexico City was just ravaged by cholera. 18,000 individuals died during that summer. Cholera spread all over Mexico, including into Texas, where Stephen F. Austin's niece was stricken and killed by cholera that summer. Eventually, Austin told Farias that if the Mexican government did not get off the nickel quickly and act on this Constitution of 1833, then Texans would set up their own government. And Farias and Austin had hard words, and finally departed. Austin departed, and he went back to his hotel in a huff, and he wrote the San Antonio Ayuntamiento to take the initiative to organize an independent Mexican state of Bear, and subsequently Farias and Austin reconciled. Both men admitted that their passions had gotten the best of them, and when Santa Anna returned, he met with Austin and said, "No, I won't approve separation from Coahuila, but I'll agree to virtually anything else that you want." And no doubt Stephen F. Austin said, "What about the April 6, 1830 law? Would you have Congress repeal that?" Just before Austin left Mexico City in December of 1833, he learned that the Mexican Congress had repealed the April 6, 1830 anti-immigration law, which meant that Austin was a happy camper because eventually Anglo-Americans would settle enough of them in Texas to justify independent statehood. He immediately rushed back to Texas, got as far as Saltillo, in the northern hills of Mexico today, and at Saltillo he was promptly arrested, Austin was, on the orders of Farias, who again was president, as Santa Anna had retired once again to his villa. And why? Because Stephen F. Austin's intemperate letter to the San Antonio Ayuntamiento and their response had been turned over to Ramon Musquez, the political chief in Austin, who had sent that letter to Farias, and Farias, enraged, ordered the arrest of Stephen F. Austin. Austin was returned to Mexico City. He would stay in jail for a year with no court willing to accept the jurisdiction in his case. Eventually, Austin would be released from prison on Christmas Day of 1834, but he still would have to remain in Mexico, and he finally was allowed to leave Mexico in July of 1835 with a general amnesty from the Mexican government. April the 24th, 1834, important date in Mexican history, because Santa Anna on April the 24th, 1834, returned to the capital and took power once again from Gomez Farias. And Santa Anna now proclaimed himself to be an opponent of liberalism. He dissolved the Mexican Congress. He forced Gomez Farias into exile, threw out of his cabinet all supporters of Farias. He disbanded all state legislatures and local ayuntamientos, and a new puppet Mexican Congress legalized Santa Anna's actions in October of 1835 with the Siete Leyes, the 7 laws, establishing centralized government. Under this centralized government of Mexico, states would now become departments ruled by governors appointed by the president, and appointive councils would replace each state legislature. Zacatecas, the state of Zacatecas in Mexico, immediately revolted. Santa Anna led the army into Zacatecas, killed tens of thousands. The Yucatan Peninsula broke away from the government and remained in revolt against Mexican authority until 1846. In Texas, when Santa Anna ordered his brother-in-law, General Martin Prefecto de Cas, to break up the Coahuila, Texas government, Governor Agustin Vizcaya was arrested as he attempted to transfer the archives from Saltillo to Mexico City. And the government was restored in Saltillo and as a department, and Rafael Eka y Musquez was appointed by Santa Anna as governor, with the capital firmly back in Saltillo. So I want to stop there, and I will see you around, and I'll see you in the clouds. And when we come in next time, we'll talk about the actual Texas Revolution, and we'll get you to the point where you need to be for the first test. Thank you. Bye.